Hello everyone, a very warm welcome to my channel. In this video, we will read Class 8 Supplementary Book chapter, The Selfish Giant. Giant is a very huge person and selfish is somebody who always thinks of himself. Why is the giant selfish? Let's see in the chapter. In this part, we will see that the giant's garden was beautiful and children loved to play in it. The giant, who was selfish, built a high wall around his lovely garden. Children did not enter the garden thereafter, nor did spring and summer, till the giant experienced a change of heart. So the giant, who was selfish, had a beautiful garden where children loved to play. Giant, being selfish, built a high wall around it so that children couldn't enter in the garden. Since the children couldn't enter in the garden, spring and summer also did not enter in the garden until the giant has a change of heart. And what was the change of heart? Let's see in the story. Every afternoon as they were coming from school, the children used to go and play in the giant's garden. It was a large, lovely garden with soft green grass. Here and there over the grass stood beautiful flowers like stars, and there were 12 peach trees that in the springtime broke out into delicate, means soft, blossoms of pink and pearl, and in the autumn bore rich fruit. The birds sat on the trees and sang so sweetly that the children used to stop their games in order to listen to them. "How happy we are here," they cried to each other. The giant had a beautiful garden where children used to come after their school in the afternoon and they used to play. It was a beautiful garden with soft green grass, and here and there over the grass there were beautiful flowers which looked like stars. There were 12 peach trees in the garden which in the springtime used to give soft blossoms, that means soft flower of pink and pearl color, and in the autumn they used to give rich fruits. The birds used to sit on the trees and sing sweetly, and the children used to stop their game in order to listen to the songs of the birds. They were very happy in the garden. One day the giant came back. He had been to visit his friend the Cornish ogre and had stayed with him for 7 years. When he arrived, he saw the children playing in the garden. "What are you doing here?" he cried in a very gruff voice. Gruff means rough and harsh, and the children ran away. So till the giant was not there, children used to play in his garden. But one day the giant came back. He had actually gone to visit his friend Cornish ogre. Cornish ogre is a giant of Cornwall. Cornwall is in UK. An ogre, according to legends and fairy tales, is a cruel giant who eats people. And in common usage, he is a very frightening person. So when the ogre came back and saw the children playing in his garden, he shouted in a very rough and harsh voice, and the children got scared and they ran away. "My own garden is my own garden," said the giant. "Anyone can understand that, and I will allow nobody to play in it but myself." So he built a high wall around it and put up a notice board: "Trespassers will be prosecuted." Trespassers are people who enter into somebody's land or property without his or her permission, and prosecuted means punished. So the giant was selfish and he told that my garden is my own garden and nobody is allowed to enter into it. So he built a high wall around his garden and put a notice board where it was written, "Trespassers will be prosecuted." Means anyone who enters in his property will be punished. He was a very selfish giant. The poor children had now nowhere to play. They tried to play on the road, but the road was very dusty and full of hard stones, and they did not like it. They used to wander around the high walls when their lessons were over and talk about the beautiful garden inside. "How happy we were there," they said to each other. Now the giant was selfish and he didn't allow children to enter in his garden. Children, now they had nowhere to go and play. They tried playing on the road, but it was very dusty and there were many hard stones, so they did not like playing on the road. And they used to roam around. Wander around means roam around the high walls of the garden, and they used to think about the beautiful garden inside. And they used to say how happy we were there. So since they couldn't enter, they just used to think about the beautiful garden. Then the spring came, and all over the country there were little blossoms and little birds. Only in the garden of the selfish giant, it was still winter. Now springtime came, and all around the country, trees, they started giving flowers. They started blossoming, and little birds started sitting on them. But only in the selfish giant's garden, there was still winter. Winter, you have also seen in the poem, The Ant and the Cricket, represents hard time. So it was still winter in the selfish giant's garden. The birds did not care to sing in it, as there were no children, and the trees forgot to blossom. So since there were no children, there was no spring, birds did not come in the garden, and trees also did not blossom, did not give flowers. Once a beautiful flower put its head out from the grass, but when it saw the notice board, it was so sorry for the children that it slipped back into the ground again and went off to sleep. So one beautiful flower tried to come out from the grass, but then he saw the notice board and he felt sorry for the poor children who couldn't come in the garden, and the flower went back again to sleep in the ground below the grass. The only people who were pleased were the snow and the frost. Spring has forgotten this garden, they cried, so we will live here all the year round. So the only people that visited selfish giant's garden were snow and frost. That means extreme winter. Winter stayed in the garden. Hard times stayed in the garden. They said that spring has forgotten the garden. Spring has forgotten to come in the garden. So this is all ours. We can stay in the garden all throughout the year. The snow covered up the grass with her great white cloak. Cloak means huge cloth, a long coat. So the snow covered the entire grass with a long white coat, and the frost painted all the trees silver. And frost, it dropped on the trees, and all the trees were white with frost. That means they were appearing silver. Then they invited the north wind to stay with them, and he came. He was wrapped in furs, and he rode all day about the garden and blew the chimney pots down. So snow and frost also invited their friend north wind to stay with them. And the north wind came and surrounded everything, wrapped everything in its fur. And also it blew off the chimneys. Even if there was a little fire, it put them down. This is delightful spot, he said. We must ask Hail to on a visit. The north wind said that this is delightful. This is such an interesting spot, such a happy spot. And we should also ask Hail on a visit. Hail, see, for winter there are 4 words used. Snow, frost, north wind and hail. All these have been presented as characters or persons, and they represent extreme winter. So in the garden there was extreme winter. North wind is the chilly wind, and hail is hailstorm. Hailstorm means the snowballs that fall from the sky. So all these words describe extreme winter. So hail also came. Every day for 3 hours he rattled. Rattle means to make noise like hitting hard things on the roof of castle till he broke most of the slates. So it rattled on the roof and broke most of the slates on the roof. And then he ran around and round and garden as fast as he could go. He was dressed in grey and his breath was ice-like. So snow, frost, north wind, hail all made the garden extremely wintry. There was extreme cold in the garden. There was no spring, no blossoming and no autumn, no fruits. I cannot understand why the spring is so late in coming, said the selfish giant as he sat at the window and looked out of his cold white garden. I hope there will be change in the weather. Now the giant couldn't understand why spring is not coming in his garden. He just looked out of the window and thought that winter is not going. The entire garden is cold and white, and he just hoped that there will be change in the weather. But the spring never came, nor the summer. The autumn gave golden fruits to every garden, but to the giant's garden she gave none. He's too selfish, she said. So it was always winter there, and the north wind and the hail and the frost and the snow danced about through the grass, through the trees. So the giant hoped for spring to come, but spring never came, neither summer nor autumn. Autumn, which gave fruit to every other garden, but did not come to giant's garden because it said that giant is too selfish. So there was always winter in giant's garden, and the north wind, hail, snow and frost, they enjoyed in the Selfish Giant's Garden. See, all these words, spring, summer, autumn, north wind, hail, frost, have been presented as persons. So there is a figure of speech called personification, where non-living things are attributed human character. They are presented as human. So here personification has been used to describe spring, summer, autumn, north wind, hail, storm, snow, and these are all personified. One morning, the giant was laying awake in bed when he heard some lovely music. It sounded so sweet to his ear that he thought it must be the king's musician passing by. It was really only a little linnet. Linnet is a brownish songbird which is found in Europe. So one morning, while the giant was lying awake on his bed, he heard some lovely music. Since he had not heard any music from a long time, the music sounded very lovely and he thought that it is actually king's musician passing by. But that was actually a linnet bird singing outside his window. But it was so long since he had heard a bird singing in his garden that it seemed to him to be the most beautiful music in the world. Then the hail stopped dancing over his head and the north wind ceased roaring and a delicious perfume came to him through the open casement. Ceased means stopped. Casement means a window that open on hinges like a door. Between the door there is a joint from where the doors or windows open. That is called casement. So the song was so lovely that the hail stopped dancing over the giant's head. The north wind also stopped and a delicious perfume, a very nice smell started coming from the window. I believe the spring has come at last, said the giant, and he jumped out of the bed and looked out. And the giant thought that spring at last has come and he just went to look out. Now in the second part, we will see that to celebrate the return of children, trees covered themselves with birds and blossom. The giant was delighted to see his friends back, especially a little boy whom he loved dearly. The little boy soon disappeared, only to return much later. So we will see that spring has finally come into Selfish Giant's garden because of returning of children. And the giant also had a change of heart. He was happy to see his friends, the children, especially a little boy. But the little boy soon disappeared and returned back much later. He saw a most wonderful sight. So when the giant went out, he saw a beautiful sight. Through a little hole in the wall, the children had crept in and they were sitting in the branches of the trees. In every tree that he could see, there was a little child, and the trees were so glad to have the children back again that they had covered themselves with blossom and were waving their arms gently. So the giant saw a wonderful sight. The children have crept in. Crept in means very quietly entered into his garden through a hole in the wall, and they were sitting on the branches, and the trees were also so glad to see children back into the garden that they blossomed at once. They covered themselves with flowers and they started waving their arms very softly above the children's heads. The birds were flying about and twittering with delight. Twittering means making sounds. With happiness, the birds were also flying and they were making sounds. And the flowers were looking up through the green grass and laughing, and flowers also appeared above the grass and they were laughing. It was a lovely scene. Only in one corner it was still winter. It was the farthest corner of the garden, and in it was standing a little boy. So seeing children in the garden and happiness in the garden was a lovely sight. Only in one corner there was still winter, and it was the farthest corner. It was the far off corner of the garden, where there was a little boy who was standing there. He was so small that he could not reach up to the branches of the tree, and he was wandering all around it, crying bitterly. The poor tree was still covered with frost and snow, and the north wind was blowing and roaring above it. "Climb up, little boy," said the tree, and it bent its branches down as low as it could, but the boy was too tiny. So why there was still winter in the corner? Because the boy was not able to sit on the branch of the tree, and the tree was even trying to put his branch down, lower his branch so that the boy can climb. And since the boy was not able to sit on the tree, there was still winter in that part of the garden. There was frost, there was snow, and there was north wind that was roaring above the tree. And the giant's heart melted as he looked out. So giant's heart melted. He felt pity as he looked at that little boy. How selfish I have been, he said. Now I know why the spring would not come here. I will put that poor little boy on the top of the tree, and then I will knock down the wall, and my garden shall be the children's playground forever and ever. He was really very sorry for what he had done. So when the giant saw that the little boy was not able to climb the tree, and in that part there was still winter, the giant realized that he has been so selfish, and now he understood that spring has not come to his garden because he had not let children to play there. So he thought to himself that I will put that boy on the tree and I will I will break the wall and let the children play in his garden forever. And he was very sorry for whatever he has done. So he crept downstairs and opened the front door quite softly and went out into the garden. But when the children saw him, they were so frightened that they all ran away and the garden became winter again. So the giant went downstairs very quietly into the garden, but as soon as the children saw him, they ran away. They were very scared, and the garden was again covered with winter. Only the little boy did not run, for his eyes were so full of tears that he did not see the giant coming. And the giant stole up behind him and took him gently in his hand and put him up on into the tree. Stole up means come quietly without being noticed. So only the little boy cannot see the giant because the boy's eyes were full of tears because of crying, because of not being able to sit on the tree. So the giant quietly came behind him. He held the boy and put him on the tree. And the tree broke at once into blossom, and the birds came and sang on it, and the little boy stretched out his two arms and flung them around the giant's neck and kissed him. So as soon as the boy sat on the tree blossomed with flowers. The birds also started coming there and singing, and the boy was so happy that he at once hugged the giant and kissed him. And the other children, when they saw that the giant was not wicked any longer, came running back, and with them came the spring. And other children also saw that the giant was not cruel anymore. They also came back, and with them spring came and winter was gone. It is your garden now, little children, said the giant, and he took a great axe and knocked down the wall. And when the people were going to market at 12 o'clock, they find the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen. So the giant told the children that this is your garden now, and he broke off his wall. And the people who were going to the market in the afternoon at 12, they saw the giant playing with the children in the most beautiful garden they had ever seen. All day long they played, and in the evening they came to the giant to bid him goodbye. But where is your little companion? He said. The boy I put into the tree. The giant loved him because he had kissed him. We don't know, answered the children. He had gone away. So the children played all day long, and when they came back in the evening to bid goodbye to the giant asked for the little boy whom he had put on the tree. He liked the boy most because the boy had kissed the giant. So he asked, where is that little companion, little partner, little friend of yours? And the children said that we don't know. He had gone away. You must tell him to be sure and come tomorrow, said the giant. But the children said that they did not know where he lived and had never seen him before. And the giant felt very sad. So when the giant told the children that you must tell him to come back tomorrow, the children said that they didn't know where the boy lived. So the giant felt very sad. Every afternoon when school was over, the children came and played with the giant. But the little boy whom the giant loved was never seen again. The giant was very kind to all the children, yet he longed for his little friend and often spoke of him. How I would like to see him, he used to say. Now the giant had become friends to the children, and children used to come to his garden every afternoon, and the giant used to play with them. But the little boy whom giant loved the most was never seen again. The giant was good with all the children. He loved them. Still, he missed his little friend, and he often used to speak of him. He used to say that I would like to see him, how I miss him. Years went by, and the giant grew very old and feeble. Feeble means weak. He could not play about any more, so he sat in a huge armchair and watched the children at their games and admired his garden. Years passed on, and the giant became very old and weak. He could not play with the children anymore, so he used to sit on his armchair and he used to see the children playing. And also he used to admire his garden. That means he used to praise his garden. I have many beautiful flowers, he said, but the children are the most beautiful flowers of all. So he called the children his flowers and he admired his garden. He said that he had many beautiful flowers in his garden, but children are the most beautiful of them. One winter morning, he looked out of his window as he was dressing. He did not hate the winter now, for he knew that it was merely the spring asleep and that the flowers were resting. Suddenly he rubbed his eyes in wonder and looked and looked. It certainly was a marvelous sight. In the farthest corner of the garden was a tree quite covered with lovely white blossoms. Its branches were golden and silver fruit hung down from them, and underneath it stood the little boy he had loved. One morning during winter, as the giant was dressing up, he looked outside his window. The giant did not hate winter now because he knew that it was just sleeping time for the spring and the flowers are also taking rest. So as the giant looked out of his window, his eyes widened in wonder. He looked and it was a wonderful sight what he saw. In the far corner of the garden, there was a tree which was quite covered with white flowers. And on its branches, silver fruits were hanging down. And under the tree, the little boy whom the giant loved so much was standing. Downstairs ran the giant in great joy, and out into the garden he hastened across the grass and came near to the child. Hasten means to go in a hurry. So quickly the giant ran downstairs and then across the grass he came near the child. And when he came quite close, his face grew red with anger, and he said, "Who had dared to wound thee?" Thee means you. It is an old word. It is an old word which was used in a very earlier time. It means you. So as he came near to the boy, he became very angry and he asked the boy, "Who had dared to do this to you?" For on the palms of the child's hands were the prints of 2 nails, and prints of 2 nails were on the little feet. The giant was angry because on the child's palms and feet there were prints of 2 nails as if somebody had scratched. "Who had dared to wound thee?" cried the giant. "Tell me that I may take my big sword and slay him." Slay him means kill him. So the giant said, "Who had done this to you? Just tell me and I will kill that person with my sword." "Nay," answered the child. Nay means no. "But these are wounds of love." So the child answered, "These are just wounds of love, the love that we have shared." "Who art thou?" means who are you? said the giant. And a strange awe fell on him. Awe is feeling of respect, either of fear or admiration. So the giant asked, "Who are you?" with awe. And he knelt before the little child. And then he sat on his knees before the child. As the child smiled on the giant and said to him, "You let me play once in your garden. Today you shall come with me to my garden, which is paradise." So as the giant knelt, the child smiled and said, "Once you let me play in your garden. Today I will take you to my garden, which is paradise, which is heaven." And when the child ran in that afternoon, they found the giant lying dead under the tree, all covered with white blossoms. And in the afternoon, when the children came to play in his garden, they saw the giant lying dead under his tree. He was all covered with white flowers. So the child was actually God or messenger of God who had come to take the giant, who took the giant to his paradise. The story is by Oscar Wilde. Now here are question answers of the chapter, children. You can pause the video and go through the question answers, or you can also write the question answer first and cross check. I hope you have understood the chapter well. If you have any doubt, please write in the comment and I will answer to your doubts. Thank you for listening to the video. I will see you in my next video, children. Till then, bye-bye. Take care.